Hello, everyone. My name is Brandel Unkrich from the University of Iowa. I'm a member of the Higher Education Council and your moderator for this session. We're excited to welcome you here where we'll be learning about appreciative inquiry from Carrie Marcinkevage. And while she's doing a presentation, I'll be moderating the chat as well as the Q&A, which can both be found to the right of the presentation screen. Just a note on the chat, make sure you're chatting in our as you are chatting to everyone in general. So just keep that in mind. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over.
Thanks, Brandel. So hi, welcome. Thanks for coming. I know there are so many sessions. Appreciate you spending these 20 minutes with us to do a deep, fast dive into appreciative inquiry. So I'm at Penn State University and large public institution. I'm at the business school specifically, and we have been using Salesforce multi-constituent for about 12 years. And across the university, we have at least 5 orgs that I've counted and 25 different use cases. So plenty that we're doing, and it's a real adventure. So in all of that, of course, change management has been a big issue that in every part of our lives and work lives, really. So we're going to talk today about appreciative inquiry, which is a bit of a new approach. Inquiry, so when we're asking deep questions and really exploring a topic, but also appreciative, and that word's very intentional. Appreciative meaning to value something and also to have it grow in value. So that's really the crux of appreciative inquiry. We'll talk about why this is of interest to us at this time, dig into some process and principles about it, and we'll do a little walkthrough of the process, what it might look like for a CRM strategy project. We actually use this here at Penn State for enterprise CRM. And then I'll share some resources and more information with you, and we'll wrap with Q&A. Why a new approach? Don't know about you, but most of the time when we start a change process, it starts out really negative. We're already negative when we get there, but just look at the words that we use to start change processes, right? SWOT, let's face it, we usually spend more time on the weaknesses and the threats than anything else. So gaps, root causes of failure, pain points, my favorite, burning platform, right? These are all very deficit mindsets of what don't we have, where aren't we? And so it means you are starting your change project, your very first conversations with everybody involved, they're very negative and very focused on the past, and it puts us into a closed mindset. I find it really hard to start change from that place. So appreciative inquiry is a different approach, and it started with David Cooperrider when he was doing a study with the Cleveland Clinic. He was asked to study patient care and to try to look for what would improve it. And so he started by studying patient complaints and problems and things that were going wrong. And he found he was learning a lot about that, but he was learning absolutely nothing about great patient care and how to be more successful at it. So instead, he looked at it and said, I'm going to change the question, and I'm going to talk to people who have been really successful, who's having great experience with patient care. And so when he started studying those, he found that he learned so much more from studying success than he did from studying failure. And he took that and really put it into action in terms of change management. So when we're starting these change processes, it's a matter of flipping the question. So instead of saying, what are our patient complaints like? And let's look at that in reduction. It's improving patient care. What does great patient care look like? And instead of the question being where and how are we failing, it's where and how are we succeeding? What's working well and what can we learn from that? It starts us off in a different place. We're energized, it's more positive, it's more future focused, and it's more open-minded. And frankly, we get off the ground faster. So to me, it's much more productive and it's a much faster process. And Barbara Fredrickson, in her work on positivity, says this is really the mindset of broaden and build. It's where innovation and creativity comes from. So really, it's a whole lot easier to change from there. So that's why I think a new approach is important and potentially a great place to be. So the process and the principles, here's the quick overview of it. What I've done here is highlighted in yellow the specific things that make this particular change management approach different from some others that you may have experienced. So the topic, the very first thing you do, is one of the key things that's different. Your topic, your goal, your question needs to focus on what you want, not what you don't want, the presence of something rather than the absence of it. In the process itself, it's about starting with assets instead of the negative mindset, the deficit mindset, starting with where are we great? What are our strengths? What are our assets? And then moving from there to what does great performance look like here? So what are our aspirations? And then the actions and the assessments, the metrics, those parts are very similar to most other change processes that you would find, but your starting point is the key difference here. The principles are the other thing that I think make this particular change management process so different from many others. The principles, very quickly, and then I'll put these in some other real language, these can be a little academic. Simultaneity suggests that the minute you ask the question, you are already creating change, the very second you ask it. Constructionist principle comes from academic research in constructionism. So we shape reality together, our perception, the words we use, how we describe it, we do that by co-creating it together. Anticipatory principle says the images that we create inspire action. So we can see where we want to go by the pictures we create. The positive principle is when you have forward focused positive energy, that's more likely to take you places better and faster. And the poetic principle is what we focus on grows. The minute we start to pay significant attention to something, that attention leads us to action. So if you pull all this together, what would it look like to get this off the ground? So if you were starting with a group, you would want to pick an affirmative topic. So the presence, not the absence of something. What do we want? We want better customer satisfaction rather than fewer customer complaints. So that's the flip. Then sharing best practices of the process with those who are going through it, talking about how, right, focusing on gaps keeps us looking down and backward, and focusing on strengths and aspirations helps us look up and forward, future focus. This is really where innovation and creativity come from. The questions we ask create change. What we focus on grows. And the more we can see that desired outcome, the more likely we are to get there. Those are essentially the principles that are shaped into some best practices and kind of combined, which is where I think the real power comes from. And then you share and just start the process of starting off with assets. So what I'll do with this is just walk through it very quickly with CRM strategy development as the example. And in the examples here, the orange text is where I have highlighted the elements that I think make this appreciative inquiry change management a little unique from others. So assets. So what are our strengths? What are our assets? And appreciative inquiry has a really unique and fun way of starting this off, and that's high point interviews. So you'd partner people up and you would say, what is a high point peak experience for you in working with your constituents in this case, and have them talk about it and then debrief it. That's really pulling out all the strengths, all the assets, and note that it's also activating the two principles at the bottom, right? Positive, it's getting people in a good place to be ready to be creative, and what we focus on grows. We're focusing on the really positive things, and that's where we're starting to push our attention. The second part would be aspirations. So what would peak performance look like? And another classic from appreciative inquiry is to say, it's 5 years from now. And in our case, what we did, the Wall Street Journal just said, we're amazing at university relationships. And what does it look like? So this is where you start to live into that vision. What could it look like? What are we doing? How are we operating? And it kind of leapfrogs and takes you there. And then there's some helpful questions. And again, the minute you ask the question, you are already creating change. And the more people can talk about and see what it might look like, the more likely you are to inspire action and get there. The last two stages of the process look pretty similar. The point I would make here is rapid prototyping, to the degree that you can actually create things, and in software development, great, because we can do rapid prototyping very well. And the more you can make it look and feel like the future, the better. Again, constructionist, co-creating, and anticipatory, the more we can see it, the more likely we are to actually act into it. And assessment, classic. The key that I would point out here is framing the metrics positively. So again, instead of reduction of complaints, look for successes, increases in satisfaction, the positive framing of the metrics, because that will keep you focused on the positive outcomes. So that is a quick walk through the whole process and the principles that underlie it. And I really would say another note that the principles really are a key part of what makes this such a different approach. So lots more information and resources for you. Slides and the video will be available. There's a whole host of resources, and the Appreciative Inquiry Commons is a place where you can go and learn a whole lot more about the process. The origin of it, I mentioned 4A. The original process was a 4D process. Now, I work in a business school, and I have to tell you that dream and destiny were just not going to fly in my organization. So assets, aspirations, actions, and assessments worked a little better. And the community, and David Cooperrider himself, they are very, very interested in you taking this and adapting it for your organization and what works for you. A little more detail about the principles here that you can dig into those a little bit. And honestly, to me, the principles are really a big part of what makes this unique. So as you're thinking about that first part, the assets and success factors that you may have as strengths in your organization, another way to approach that for CRM could be, what are things that we need to be good at? What are things that we're good at? Let's look at something and talk about where we have strengths. So if you need something to draw on from that, from research, this is an example of critical success factors for higher ed CRM. And then lastly, if you are really, really into it and really interested in more, and if you are into meditation at all, this is a series of meditations, 5 minutes each, about each one of the Appreciative Inquiry principles. So if you want to get deep into the principles, which again, I think are a bit of a differentiator, this is an option for you. So that's the highlights. That's Appreciative Inquiry. I thank you very, very much for your time and for listening to this part of it. And let's dig into questions.
Thank you so much, Carrie. That was really great to hear and learn from you. If you do have questions, go ahead and put those in the chat. And I don't see any questions, but Carrie, I do have a question for you. So these principles really seem applicable to lots of areas. So have you used these in Appreciative Inquiry in other ways?
Yes. Let's see, let me give you a work example and a home example. Work example is I've actually done this with performance reviews. So when we're talking about performance reviews and talking about people's development, we can say, well, what are you really great at? Well, how would you like to activate that further or differently? Or well, where else could you apply that? And helping people focus on where they could apply strengths it's the strengths revolution. There are lots of books, the Gallup books and Marcus Buckingham's work. There's a lot about this that can help people take it and focus in that direction. So I've used it, and I've actually used the process for coaching, right? Where are you? What do you want to be good at? What would that look like? What can we do to get there? Okay, well, now what changes, right? So pretty applicable in lots of different areas. At home, I've tried this little example with my son. He was not having a good time at school. He was struggling a little bit. And I said, all right, we're gonna try something. I want you to think of 3 positive things that happened today. And I'm not proud of this part. I said, I'll give you a dime for each one, and as many as you can come up with. And he thought about it, and it was really hard the first couple of days we did this to get him to think of the positives. But then as we started to do it, he actually overcompensated, and now it's a taste of my toothpaste, and I was going to go broke if he was doing all of those. So we backed it off a little bit. And after a while, he started to really more easily come up with the things that went well, right? And that was poetic principle. What you focus on grows. If you're looking for the positive and positive principle, you'll find it. If you're looking for the negative, you'll find it. And then how could he work with that and how could he use it? And at the beginning of this, he had said, you know, Mommy, I think that happy people have happier lives than me. It's because they have happier lives, and that's why they're happy. And I tested this again at the end, and he said, you know, Mommy, no, it's not the case that happy people have happier lives. They just find happy things. And I said, oh, that's great. And then all of a sudden he said, no, actually, Mommy, that's not right. Happy people do have happier lives. And I went, oh no, I failed and I have to give back my certification and this is just awful. And he looked at me and he said, Mommy, happy people have happy lives because happy people make happy things happen. So from the mouths of babes, he schooled me. I learned my lesson there, and that was his lesson. Happy people have happy lives because happy people make happy things happen. So that's appreciative inquiry at home.
Yeah, that's great. Great story. And we're getting comments in the chat. Love the story. And someone wants a t-shirt with that on it. So there you go. Another business idea.
That's a great idea.
We have a question from Kyla. So she says, I'm completely on board with focusing on the positive, but we can also think of things we want to avoid. Is there a place in this method to have an exercise to voice those concerns to ensure they're covered, but then translate them to positives?
Yeah, so what we find, so one of the myths, right, an appreciative inquiry myth is that you gloss over the negative and you don't talk about it. The reason that's a myth is it's more every negative that we experience is the absence of something positive. And so it's simply a matter of taking those conversations and saying, oh, what do we want? What are the things that we wish we'd have accomplished, right? So you can acknowledge it very, very easily. But, and if positive is not a great word for you, you can reframe it into a future focused rather than past focused frame of mind, right? So it's not what didn't go well, right? But it's, if we do this again, what do we want to happen, right? So it doesn't have to be Pollyanna. I work in a business school, right? It's all about productivity. I totally get it. And it's really about future orientation and constructive goal orientation. Where are you going rather than the negative of where have you been? So acknowledging it by the way of what would you like to see?
Good. Thank you for sharing all of that. There's no other questions in there, but you'll want to take a look at the chat, Carrie. There's some great comments from people in there. And thank you so much for your presentation. We're really excited to apply what we've learned and appreciate you sharing it with us. Thanks everyone for attending. There's more content coming up today. So you can head back to the main stage, or you can use the agenda to find your next session. And remember to also visit networking tables or a sponsor booth.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.